the way so they could walk and take as many steps as they needed to. The same thing. Nothing has changed. And if Jesus came today, they would crucify him again. But then I thought to myself, what would we do today if Jesus came to the Adventist church? You know, first I looked at the Jewish nation and I said they would not tolerate the teachings of Jesus today, of their Messiah. There's still resistance, and there's still pride, and there's still some Jewish rabbis prefer to teach that all the Old Testament is only a fable, that God never did anything for the Jewish nation. It's all tradition and a fable, rather than admit that God did work for them and that they drifted from truth. There's so much pride in the stand that they have. They would rather deny their whole heritage rather than admit that they're wrong. But then when I started asking myself and putting the finger, what if Jesus were preaching here right now? What would he teach? How comfortable would it make us? What if John the Baptist came before Jesus? What if John the Baptist started preaching here every day in preparation for Jesus' coming? What kind of things would he tell us? Oh, generation of vipers? Probably, huh? Do you think he would say the same thing? Or are we much better than the previous generations? The same thing is being repeated today. And how comfortable would that message be? Oh, generation of vipers, huh? I don't think that he would be invited into too many churches. I got a feeling he would have to preach out in the countryside. We were having an evangelistic series in a country some months ago, and a letter went out, a document, saying nobody is allowed to preach in our churches unless they come from a higher organization with proper credentials and approvals. So I wrote to the union president a nice letter, and I told them, we need to be very careful what we state, because Jesus today is knocking on our doors. Jesus today, in the form of messengers, are coming to knock on the doors of our churches and our hearts. And if we say nobody except they come from a higher organization with proper credentials can come into the Adventist church, you just eliminated Jesus and all the disciples. But that's exactly what is happening. Jesus is knocking on our doors today. Jesus is sending disciples out today to prepare his people. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Make the crooked places straight. And as we do this, we're reacting many times exactly the same way as the Jewish nation did with John the Baptist. People are coming out everywhere to listen to the message, but it's an uncomfortable message. And then, when Jesus does come, another uncomfortable message. He was also left out on the streets as well. And we think, could that happen today? It is happening today. It's exactly happening today. Because Jesus is pretty well left out on the streets. Not many churches today allow Jesus and his message of reform and revival and reproof of the heart to come in and preach from our pulpits. It's because the same thing is happening, and the tragic thing is the final result will be that God will recognize their choices, and he will say, if that's what you want, then I have to accept. God never forces. He just stands at the door and knocks. And if we open the door, then he will come in. But if we don't open the door, what will happen? He will stay outside. So in John 10, Jesus was talking about the Good Shepherd. And as a Good Shepherd, he walks in front of his sheep. Now, not everybody walks in front of their sheep. In the Andes Mountains, I was recently up in the Andes Mountains in Bolivia and Peru, and I noticed that the shepherds walk in the back, and they have a little stick, and they drive the sheep in front of them. But in the Middle East, the shepherds walk in front of their sheep, and the sheep follow them. A little bit different scenario. And then we watched in surprise as two groups of sheep, led by two different shepherds, came together and all the sheep got mixed up together on the same road, and they all got mixed up together. And I thought, that's a nightmare. How will they ever figure out which sheep is whose? They all look alike. It wasn't a problem. The shepherd just made his whistling noise and went this direction. The other shepherd went in the other direction. And all the sheep separated themselves. They knew their shepherd. Jesus says, my sheep know my voice, and I know my sheep. Somebody says, Uncle David, you can't really talk to God, can you? Excuse me? How am I supposed to know my shepherd's voice if I'm not talking to him? If I know my shepherd's voice, that means I'm talking to him. I hear him. I can tell that sweet, still, small voice telling me, do this, do that. Don't do that. Go the other way. And if we're talking to him every day and listening through his word and through prayer, we will recognize his voice. He says, my sheep know my voice, and I know my sheep. I'm known of mine. So, as the good shepherd is leading us, there are some sheep that get lost. And Jesus said, I am come that what? I've come to give them life and they may have it more abundantly. But he says, I'm come to seek and to save that which was lost. Now, if that's his mission, that was his mission and it still is his mission, and that mission is to be our mission, to seek and to save that which was lost. And if we are told that nobody can be saved unless you're a missionary, and you go, I have to be a missionary to be saved? Well, think of it. If you don't share in the mission of Jesus Christ, how in the world would you be saved to heaven? Only those that share in the mission of seeking and saving that which was lost, that share in the mission of Jesus Christ, would be saved to heaven, because we all have the same mission. If your mission is to accumulate wealth and gain power and prestige, you would be very miserable in heaven, because in heaven everybody's serving each other. I remember your story hour when I was a child. They had a very interesting story that they made, and the demons were talking together, and they were arguing together and fighting each other. And I thought, well, that's interesting. I wonder if that really happens. Do you think the demons today are very courteous to each other? Do they have any nice characteristics, Christ-like characteristics? No. They're very selfish. They're always fighting. Satan has to keep them under control. But they share in the mission of destruction. But they're always wanting to be number one. Satan is the first one among all of them that wants to be number one, right? He still wants to be number one. And I'm sure that he has angels that want to be number one, that are always fighting to see if they can get his position. And so like a dictator, he has to keep them under control. And probably they're always fighting and arguing together. Nobody's courteous to each other. They're all nasty to each other. They all hate each other. But they work together to accomplish the mission. And we don't want to be like that. But if the enemy can work together, surely God's people can work together. I think of the need for unity. That is the dream. That was Jesus' prayer. Jesus' prayer just prayed to his Father that they might be one like we are one. And in John 17, the dream, the heart of Jesus is to have a people that work together under his direction as one family. Now, does that reflect the church today? All of us working together with no problems? Or are there different groups in the church today? There are some that have leprosy. I'm among those. Leper, steer clear. And then there's some that don't have any leprosy, but they have to be careful lest they can get contaminated with lepers. But you know, when I was in India, I went to a leper colony, and I got my camera out and started taking pictures. I wanted to start a project there. I was invited to start a project. And I started taking pictures, and I expected no problems, but they started shouting and screaming and put the camera away. You just want to get money, and you collect all the money, but you won't come and help us. We did build them a water tank so they could collect water, and we did build a secondary school there in the leper colony for them. But initially when I got there, they were all angry and nobody, with no pictures, no pictures. And while they were over there arguing, I put, no problem. I put the camera away. And then I remembered the story of Jesus, how the lepers used to tell Jesus, if thou wilt, thou canst make me whole. And I remembered that Jesus used to touch the lepers. Nobody would touch a leper. You would be unclean. But Jesus always was touching lepers. So I said, maybe that's what I need to do. Maybe I need to go touch the lepers instead of. So I went over there, and there was a person. There was a lady that had no ears. All her ears had been eaten off by the bacteria. Diplococcus, if I remember my microbiology from years ago, Diplococcus lepra. I don't know if anybody can confirm it? You don't remember your microbiology? It's related to Diplococcus, Mycobacterium. That's what it is. Yeah, but is it related to tuberculosis? Yeah, Mycobacterium, and not the Diplococcus, Mycobacterium tuberculosis and Mycobacterium lepra. It takes about 2 years with the known medicine that we have, to cure. But these people had no medicines, and they put them all in leper colonies, and then forgot about them, and they just lived there with their children and everything. So I saw this lady that had no ears. You know, all the soft tissues get eaten up by the Mycobacterium, and then there's soft tissues in their face. Sometimes the nose is missing. And so I went over there, and I shook the hand of a person that had no fingers. I kissed the lady on the cheek that had no ears and no nose. And I gave a hug to somebody else. And pretty soon, there was silence. No more arguing. Everybody was like, look at that man. He's hugging everybody. He's kissing everybody. I figured God could protect me. If he wants me to have leprosy, well, I'll get it. But if not, if I keep my health up, probably I wouldn't. But I did give them all a hug and kissed them and held their hands. And immediately, they started smiling. They all gathered around me. Picture! Let's take a picture together. And it opened all the doors, and then they came, come to me, take a picture with me. Look, I don't have shoes. I just have stubs. Take a picture. And there was like bones almost sticking out sometimes, and it was so much agony in India. I just could hardly stand the pain of all the pain that they go through, of just being a witness of it. But only 2 hours a day they had water. And so everybody's standing to get a little bit of water from the little pipe that comes out, and the next person would come and the water would run on the ground, and then the next person, what happens if you don't have fingers? You carry your bucket kind of holding it up like this on your arm, and you can hardly walk, and you hold a bucket in there, and then you have to walk home with your bucket of water, and that's all your water you get for all day. How do you get a bath? How do you get enough drinking water? Sometimes they have children that can help. So we built a water tank so that when the water came in, all of the water would go into a tank, and then from the tank, they could get buckets of water, turn the faucet on and off, and they wouldn't have to be pressured to get water during those 2 hours. They could have water all day long. That's the least we could do. Eventually, we worked with another organization to put in a well, which helped the water situation. But it was when you touched the lepers that all of a sudden, all the doors opened. And I think, do we have lepers in the church today? Oh, well, I can't work with you because not everybody sees you well. I can't work with you because you don't agree with everything I agree with. We see things differently, so you stay on your side and I'll stay on my side. And of course, we can't belong to the same organization. And don't expect me to share resources from my organization with your organization. Whatever comes in is mine. You do your own thing. No, you can't put your brochures on my table. You understand? You understand very well what I'm talking about. But the prayer of Jesus was that all of us that are working together, we work together in harmony. Is it necessary for me and my wife to agree 100% on everything? No. but we're still husband and wife. In fact, I think it's impossible for men and women to see everything exactly the same. I am told that everything that a man tells a woman, only about 40% gets through. And everything a woman tells a man, only about almost half gets through. So what she says is not necessarily what you hear. You understand? That's just because of the difference of the sexes. And then you start trying to mix cultures. You have a Spanish person telling an North American person, and then you have an African person telling an Asian person, and the cultures just make it even more difficult to understand because you interpret it through the big filter called culture. And your sex determines it. There's a lot of things. But if we can get together like that, surely God's people can work together. We have to be more flexible, more open. We have to be more forgiving. We have to be more tolerant of different opinions. I was sitting with my wife in Amsterdam, getting ready to leave. And the man next to me said, he heard me on the phone talking to somebody, and he said, "What do you do?" He was just sitting there. We were waiting for check-in. And we told him, and he said, I'm a believer. Just tell me. I want to know more about what you believe." Well, we started to tell him, and he goes, "Oh, Seventh-day Adventist?" And he started saying, I don't know why you all believe in God the Father, Son, and there's only God the Father. There's no other God. And he went on about other things and other things and other things and other things. And why do you baptize in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit? And why do you do this? Why do you do that? Well, my wife and I just sat there and listened to him. And he knew it. He studied a lot. He was quite educated in that area. And we just smiled and said, well, we believe because of this, and the other. I know, but, and he wanted to argue a little bit, and we just listened to him and smiled. And pretty soon he said, it's not an accident, that we met. Can we maintain contact? I want to know more about you. I want to exchange more, and I want to read some material. Send me some material to read. And we didn't even argue. We just smiled. Like, this is a child of God. And he doesn't agree with what we do, that's okay. It's a matter of time. And as long as he submits to the Holy Spirit's going to be leading him into all truth. And so, what about us inside the house? We need to be a little more tolerant too. One time I was walking across a parking lot in Tennessee, and somebody came and said, "Why do you have such a person working with you in your office?" Why? Why do you allow them to be in your office to work? They do not believe like you do. I said, I got a Muslim working for me in South America. What's wrong with that? I'm going to tell the world that you're tolerating this. And I said, but they're more Christian than you are. I said, they at least behave nice. And so sometimes we believe, like the Pharisees, that it's a matter of this, and this, and then you're okay with God. And really, where does the spirit of love and compassion and tolerance come in? We have to be able to work together. That doesn't mean we have to believe together. The Holy Spirit's going to bring us all together in unity. We have much to learn yet. The disciples thought they knew something. They didn't know anything. And after Jesus died, their hopes were destroyed. We thought it was him that was going to be the king of Israel. Didn't they hear anything that Jesus was telling them? Evidently they didn't understand. They had their big filters on, and all the words of Jesus were interpreted within the context of what they believed. But it was just a matter of time. The Holy Spirit brought them together in unity. And it was a mighty, powerful group. And so, we're not just here for some more meetings. Another year of camp meetings. No, it can't be. Something has to be different this year. We're too close to the end of time to be playing games. Something has to change. And that change is to give Jesus what he's always wanted. People totally surrendered to him, working together in unity. We're not sacrificing our beliefs. This is not ecumenism. We're not giving away our beliefs. Well, let's just talk about love and let's not talk about the Bible. No, we're not saying that. We're saying within our experience and as we pull forward together, let us be one family. Behold how they love each other is one of the signs of God's people. Could it be that among God's remnant people that don't love each other, maybe they're not going to go to heaven? Could it be that we're all so correct in what we believe, but we don't reflect the unity of God's love? Without love, we have nothing. We can give our bodies to be burned, but without love, it is nothing. So I would like to challenge you. I would like to challenge you that beginning today, beginning with this camp meeting, when we go home, we have a commitment to working with each other as one family. It means that we have to open up our doors to have other people be different than we are. It means maybe they see things differently. You say, if love is the highest characteristic of God, higher than all of the gifts and all of the things, then if we don't have love, it doesn't really matter what you believe. Could it be that we have everything right and we don't have love? We really don't belong to God. Because the highest characteristic is, behold how they love each other. They don't always see things the same. They don't always work the same. Sometimes they need a little bit of distance for personalities. Like Paul and Barnabas had to temporarily work separately because of personality issues. But the Holy Spirit brought them together later. Sometimes, you can't put two bowls in the same china shop. I've noticed that you can't put two bowls in the same corral. When I have two high energy persons, you work in this project and you work in that one. Otherwise, conflict of personality. And so administratively, we have to try to match people. Jesus matched Peter with John. Peter was impulsive, let's go, nothing can go wrong, we can do it. And John was, we have to think carefully. We have to love each other. We have to think and be sure that we're modeling what Jesus asked us to do. And between them both, they both worked very well together. In Bolivia, when I grew up, I used to work with cattle. My dad was able to, he saw the need for young people to get an education, but there was no resources. And since all of the jungles there in Bolivia, it's cattle country. And so he went to the different cattlemen and he said, would you be willing to give me a couple head of cattle? I want to start a project that can help to fund young people to go to the university. So he got 2 here and 2 there and a few there and a few others. Pretty soon, we had about 100, then it became up to 400 before we left. And every year we would sell off the cows, and then we would pay my dad would pay the tuition for young people. Over 100 young people went to the university paid that way. They would come and work for a year, and they would leave. Well, I was only 10 years old, 11 years old, but I loved cows, so I would get up and milk the cows with them. At 2 o'clock in the morning, 8 of us would milk 200 head of cows by hand. And then afterward, we would ride the bulls. We'd put a strap on and see if who could stay on the longest. And I'm lucky I'm still alive. I've had the bulls stomp on me and jump on me and stick a horn through my chest. If it weren't that it hit just right, it would have gone into my heart. But it took the skin right off my sternum. And so we would do all of this. And as I was working with these, I learned a lot about animals. I learned a lot how to care for animals. And we had a great big ox. His name was Edmundo. Big ox. Very easygoing ox. He wasn't riled up or anything, just a tame thing. But when he pulled, boy, he would pull hard when you put him in there. But we had a wild cow, and she was so wild, this cow, and so we said, why don't we just strap him together with Edmundo and let her learn to be tame. So we put the yoke on, and over there in Bolivia, the yokes are not like the kind that go under the neck. They're tied to the horns. So we tied that yoke on, and everywhere Edmundo went, he just dragged the cow with him. The cow would just pull this way and that way, and Edmundo would just patiently keep going. and he would be grazing. And finally she learned she's not going to change anything. She might as well toe the line. So everywhere that the ox went, she was sure to follow. Couldn't be otherwise. And she learned how to behave. But Edmundo was very big, and he just kept on plodding. And here was this cow that probably made his life miserable, because he would like to be eating quietly, but this cow was jerking one way into the other, and he could hardly eat. But after a while, she learned to just follow him everywhere he went. And I think, don't we need to put on the yoke of Christ? The yoke of Christ is like, we're yoked together. Everywhere Christ goes, we go. Anything he does, we do. Anything he models, we are to model. And I think of the love of Christ, and I think of the tolerance of him, even for his enemies. How much love do we have for our enemies? Sometimes we get impatient with people who say things that are pretty harsh. But Jesus was always patient. And I realized how much I need to change. So I would like to propose that beginning now, we learn how to work with other ministries. And they say, can you help us? Sure, we can help. What can we do to help you? And you know what? I'll tell you a secret. The more you give, the more you receive. Is that a principle of heaven? Given it shall be given unto you. We learn that the more you give, the more you receive. Now, we don't give because, we want to receive. But it just always happens that every time you share what you think that you need, more comes back. I don't know how God does it, but that's the principle of the entire universe. And Jesus gave and gave and gave, and he wants us to give. And as we give, more will come back. And God will make sure that we have a constant stream to be able to continue giving. And it's not to